Good afternoon, everyone. We've just hit midday, so we're going to get started on today's investor briefing, where we've still got quite a few people logging on, and we've got attendees logging on from all over the world as well. My name is Alfred, and I'm part of the investor relations team at Novatti, and I'll be hosting today's quarterly investor briefing. We're joined today by Novatti CEO Peter Cook, who will provide a brief presentation on the June quarter results, which many of you will have already seen, and then we'll open the floor up to questions from investors and analysts. Throughout the presentation, if you do have any questions, please type them into your Q&A box on the left-hand side of your screen. If you're using a smart device, your Q&A box is at the bottom of your screen, and we'll just read out the questions after the quick presentation. As many of you maybe will be aware, it's been a bumper quarter and bumper FY22 for Novatti. So Peter, I won't take up any more of your time. I will hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Alfred, and welcome all. Look, we have had great results, and it is pleasing to go through it. I see we've got a number of analysts on the call, definitely Ken and Glenn, so welcome, as well as our traditional retail investors, and I think we've got a couple of institutional investors as well. So look, just getting straight into the numbers. Sales revenue for the year, $32.5 million, virtually double last year, very, very strong growth. The last quarter we did $11 million, and if you think about that in another way, we're on a run rate of well north of $40 million for going into this current financial year. If you look at the last 5 years, our average revenue growth has been 76% across that time per annum. Very important, I think, in this current climate and how growth tech companies are being looked at is your consumption of cash. We're down 48% compared to the prior quarter, and as I'll get to later on, there's a big focus within the business on moving towards that cash flow positive position. So if we look at the June quarter, we're up 121% year on year, and in terms of our what we call our processing revenue, 157% year on year. And on the Reckon situation, Reckon announced that they'd sold their APS division. We've sort of looked at how that's going to play out, and we think that we'll get $8 million plus as a special dividend from Reckon sometime in the near future. Just moving on, please. So just going back to our core sort of value proposition, we are a business-to-business payments company, and our clients could either be other financial institutions, banks, or non-bank financial institutions, or they could be a traditional merchant or business that is looking for business payments. So we have built an ecosystem, and we are, with one minor exception, our business, we service other business customers. And within our proposition and the services that we offer, we are a multi-services payments company. We offer what's called acquiring services, issuing services, cross-border payments, subscription billing, and we're well into the journey of increasing our total business offering by gaining a bank license. And that in itself has been a major piece of work, and I'll also talk about that a bit later on. So business to business, multiple services. In terms of how we see that, and it's really based on what we would call an ecosystem. Our ecosystem we see as a function of licenses, of which we have many, and we are still aiming for more licenses both within Australia and overseas. Technology that integrates to other companies and works with our licenses to drive services, and global partnerships. And you know, we talk about Visa, MasterCard, Alipay, Apple Pay, WeChat Pay, global companies that we are working with, in some cases have licenses with, and we can leverage their networks to provide services to our customers. Just thinking about, some statistics that we've seen recently. The trend, notwithstanding, the share market and other things have had their problems over the last year, and asset classes have been repriced. But if we look at the markets that we are in, digital payments, the growth in it, the need for digital payments, the conversion of cash to cashless, the speeding up of payments, the integration of payments into other software systems, all of that is growing. And just some statistics we've pulled out, that the number of adults between China and India that have made their first digital merchant payment since the start of COVID is 180 million people. So, similar stats at a much lower level exist within Australia and within other countries we deal in. So as a general thematic, this idea of growth in digital payments exists, and it's that thematic that is really a tailwind to a lot of the services we provide. Getting back into some of the numbers, on the June quarter, $11 million of sales revenue, 121% increase year on year. Now that did include revenues from ATX in Malaysia, but notwithstanding that, there was still very, very high growth within our existing business. And of course, the ATX acquisition has brought additional revenues. And very importantly, consumption of cash compared to the prior quarter significantly down, and that's very much focused on the growth is consistent across quarters, and it's consistent across years within our business. On revenue growth, $32.5 million. Last year we were about $16 million for the whole year, so virtually doubled, 97%, and again consistent growth across the years for our business. Just looking at the future, we've been talking about stablecoin as an additional service offering and component to our business. The AUDD will be the token name. We are looking to launch in the next couple of months on initially the Stellar blockchain, then the Ripple blockchain, and further blockchains in the following months. Business to business focus, very much about improving payments. Another, let's call it arrow in our quiver. We are being supported in the funding for this new business by our partners, Stellar and Ripple. So essentially, Novatti has a new growth business with very minimal funding of its own, and this will drive significant revenues going forward. So looking forward, what can our investors expect? A very, very strong focus from the board and management on getting to cash flow positive. And that is going to be attained by growth in revenues, bringing growth in margins, and also driving efficiencies and tight cost control within the business. We've made substantial progress on that between the March quarter and the June quarter, and you can expect that focus and that decrease will continue in the forthcoming quarters. We are really focused on leveraging our existing investment in technology and people and the services that we provide, our ecosystem. So the more that we can leverage, we can just monetize and get greater value out of really the last 5 years of investment in this ecosystem. And talking about growth, we will continue to face into large markets such as stablecoin and other services. We will continue to go for growth, but sustainably so. And as I said, really focused on working within the parameters of moving to cash flow positive and leveraging our existing investments. We do have a very strong balance sheet for a growth company. And, we see that we can leverage that balance sheet to be able to bring capital to bear without diluting shareholders as a primary aim of the board. So looking forward, shift to positive cash, leverage what we've got, and continue to drive for growth, given the strong thematics that drive our business. Alfred, happy to take questions from now.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that nice quick presentation. If anyone does have any questions, we've had quite a few come through already. Please enter them into your Q&A box on your left-hand side of the screen, or bottom if you're on a smart device. Peter, first question comes from Alan. Any banking license update, and does ANZ's takeover of Suncorp support the need for more licenses to be issued?
So I guess to answer the first part of that, we are still very focused and strongly pursuing gaining our bank license, and management are very much of the view that we're in the home straight, and we are working with APRA to complete that. And in the past, we've sort of given timelines on it. We do think that it is within reach. So maybe that's a way of addressing that without giving an exact time frame. In terms of ANZ buying Suncorp, we do have very concentrated banking in Australia, and that further concentrates it. I think there've been a number of articles in newspapers about that concentration, in particular for SMEs in Queensland, and I assume the ACCC and maybe the Queensland government and others will look at that. But more importantly, for what we want to do is to bring an innovative service, very much about cross-border banking or borderless banking and servicing migrants and trade payments. We don't directly want to compete with the tier one banks for our primary services. And we think that our business plan stacks up and can support that actually diversity of offering in Australia that should make that bank very successful.
Thanks, Peter. In terms of foreign exchange, has the lower Australian dollar driven much of the growth?
A lower Australian dollar helps some of our revenues, but has not had a meaningful effect on our revenues, for the results that we've shown today.
Thanks, Peter. Question from Glenn. Does the launch of iPhone Pay in the US represent an opportunity or a threat? How does this change your perception of the global payments industry?
I think that, the handset manufacturers, as an example, with their own payment methods and trying to grab, either control of the consumer or the merchant and fees in the middle there in their own ecosystems. At one level, net it creates opportunities. And if you go back to this whole concept about cash to cashless payments and digital transactions, it's just accelerating that. So we're seeing that it is easier for people to do, smartphone-based payments. They are a digital payment, and that therefore leads into our ecosystem.
Thanks, Peter. Question from Ken. Which parts of the business were the key drivers of revenue growth in Q4?
So key drivers, we've had very strong growth within acquiring, but that's off a smaller base. We've had strong growth in issuing off a smaller base. Our cross-border payments has been very, very strong and would be the largest single element. So hopefully that answered the question. I mean, we've had growth right across the business. The largest component would be in the cross-border payments and settlements area.
Thanks, Peter. In rough terms, how much of the cash costs are in relation to obtaining the banking license?
It's an interesting thing. We are within the data that you're seeing, we are covering the costs of the bank application. And so it's essentially a sunk cost or an investment cost. So if we weren't applying for the bank license, then our monthly and quarterly costs would be significantly less. So at the moment, you could, in an accounting sense, we are absolutely wearing that as an investment.
Peter, a follow-up question from Ken on that. What specifically are you doing to control costs? Was there a significant change in headcount over the quarter?
Ken, so really trying to do a few things there. One is, if you look at it in a P&L sense, grow revenues, grow margin against the revenues, and then essentially maintain or improve the efficiency of or productivity of the costs you've got. Now, in a payments business, our biggest costs are essentially staff, and we've spent really the last 18 months growing our team and our capability, and now that the focus is about leveraging everything we've got, including our staff and teams, try to hold those costs and very much grow the revenue side off roughly the same cost base.
Thanks, Peter. I'm going to lump two questions together from Matt and Sam.
Yeah.
Any update on the BC Invest agreement for the banking business?
So in terms of the funding for the bank from externals, our commitments from external investors remain the same. So we have investors for the bank license application, and those commitments continue.
Thank you. A question from Trevor. Please comment on Q4 increase in gross margin, 32%, as compared to total year gross margin, 30%. Is it likely to stabilize at 32%, or could it go higher still?
So there's a few parts of that. One goes to product mix, but the other goes to really having our teams focus on gross margin, and so there is a focus across the business to lift gross margin as our business grows, and in some cases, depending on the customer mix, we might bring on a large wholesale customer, and so you might take some lower margin on that. But overall, against the whole business, the focus is on increasing margin.
Thanks, Peter. Another question from Trevor. Can you describe how the Reckon revenue might grow?
So what we've aimed for and are working really successfully with is to work with Reckon on offering payment services to their customers, so that their cloud customers can have very efficient payments as part of their accounting service. So essentially, one offering where the small business owner can manage their business, including payments, and Reckon offers connectivity to bank accounts and so forth. So what we need to do is work with Reckon, which we're doing, is to offer let's call it integrated payment services that are a good value proposition to the small business owner, so that they can take up our payment services, which gives us revenue and Reckon revenue, and meanwhile improve the life of that small business owner. So we've done a lot of work with Reckon. They are very, very good at marketing to their customer base, and we've been able to bring to bear a service called Reckon Payments, and that's being offered out to their customers now, and we've had good take up.
Thanks, Peter. As we are starting to run out of time now, if anyone else does have any questions, please pop them into your Q&A box. I'll probably just go through another 2 or 3. Peter, question from
someone's mentioned Hedera. So we have myself and our manager for stablecoin were at a conference in Texas called Consensus about a month ago, and actually we had extensive conversations with them about actually getting them to also essentially incentivize us to bring their blockchain in as an additional network. And So I think you'll see over the next sort of year or so that there'll be Stellar, Ripple, Hedera, Ethereum, where many stable coins have sort of started, but we'll bring on multiple blockchains, which in itself is sort of a unique offering in Australia, but it really improves the utility of the service over time.
Thanks, Peter. Question from Anthony. Why is Novatti looking at stable coins when there's so much volatility in the system?
So Anthony, I'm not sure what volatility you're talking about, but if I can sort of, if it's around, let's call it crypto, we see that stablecoin is a digital asset. Yes, it's tokenized off a blockchain, but it's not a cryptocurrency. So the volatility really only goes to the fiat currency, in our case, Australian dollars, underneath. We want to be one-for-one backed. So conceptually, there's, people talk about three types of stable coin: algorithmic, over collateralized, or fiat backed. We are only interested in fiat backed. That's what we're talking to the regulators about, and I'll call it, the volatile pseudo stable coins, I'll say, of over collateralized or algorithmic. We're nowhere near that.
Thank you, Peter. I'm just going to ask one more question from Trent. You've talked about the revenue growth over FY22. Where do you see the most growth in FY23 and going forward for the business?
So starting at, I'll go back to the thematic, nearly digital tailwinds of general growth in payments and digital transactions. But across our business, issuing, acquiring, cross-border payments, subscription billing, banking services, we see that there is growth in all areas, and we're aiming for very strong growth in all segments of the business.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. All right. As we are now running out of time, if there are any more questions, please feel free to email them in, and Peter can respond by email. You can just hit reply to the quarterly update that you got from Peter this morning. A recording of this webcast will be made available in the coming days on the Novatti Investor Centre. But Peter, on behalf of all Novatti shareholders and those in attendance, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Thanks, Alfred. Thank you all for attending, and please reach out if I can elaborate more on anything we've discussed.